Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The desert stretched out endlessly before Dario, an ocean of heat and shifting sand. The sun, a blinding inferno, and the sky beat down on him relentlessly as his caravan pressed forward, the camels trudging slowly, their steps heavy with exhaustion. Dario pulled the hood of his robe tighter over his head, trying to shield his face from the scorching wind, but it was futile. The desert consumed everything: comfort, hope, and even life. If you weren't careful, he glanced at the horizon where at last a flicker of hope appeared, the legendary city of flame. A mirage, some had warned him. But Dario knew better. He had followed the rumors, listened to the whispers of merchants who spoke of riches, beyond imagination, all housed within the golden walls of flame. It was said that the city's ruler Azathoth had lived for centuries, never aging, never weakening. The undying king, they called him, and where there was immortality, there was power that Dario intended to tap into. Very close now, his guide, an old man named Rahim, said his voice was dry and raspy from the long journey. Giri flame is just beyond that, Rich. Dario nodded, his excitement tempered by exhaustion. He had risked everything on this venture, leaving behind the safety of his prosperous trading routes in the northern provinces for the chance to establish a foothold in the desert. If he succeeded, his wealth would multiply tenfold, but there were no guarantees in the desert, only risk. The city's walls rose like a mirage as they crested the ridge, shimmering in the heat. The gates of flame were tall and imposing, carved from black stone and flanked by towering statues of warriors with flames in their eyes. Dario's heart raced as the caravan approached. This was it. This was the city that could change everything. 2 guards stood at the entrance, their armor gleaming under the sun. They were silent as Rahim spoke in a low voice, gesturing to the caravan behind them. Dario watched, feeling the tension build if they refused entry. But then, without a word, the gates swung open and the caravan was allowed through. The city was a wonder of architecture, narrow streets twisted and turned in every direction, lined with towering buildings that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Minarets spiraled upward, their tops lost in the haze of the desert heat. The scent of spices, sweat, and smoke filled the air. Dario took it all in, his merchant's mind already calculating the value of what he saw: gold, silks, spices, rare gems. Everything was here, waiting for the right trader to exploit. "Welcome to Flame," Rahim said, a hint of pride in his voice. Dario barely heard him. His eyes were fixed on the palace at the heart of the city. It rose above the rest, an enormous fortress of black stone, crowned with a tower that seemed to reach for the heaven. That was where Azathoth ruled, and that was where Dario would secure his fortune. That night, Dario found himself in the grand hall of the palace, a massive chamber illuminated by the soft glow of oil lamps. The walls were adorned with intricate mosaics depicting battles, triumphs, and the burning sun that ruled the desert sky. But it was not the art that drew Dario's attention. It was the figure seated on the throne at the far end of the hall, Azathoth, the undying king. He looked nothing like what Dario had imagined. Instead of an old, withered ruler clinging to life, Azathoth appeared to be in the prime of his youth. His skin was flawless, his black hair neatly tied behind his head, and his eyes burned with an intensity that made Dario's skin crawl. He sat casually on the throne, draped in fine silks and gold, as if immortality were a trivial matter. Merchant Dario, Azathoth's voice echoed through the chamber. It was smooth, commanding, with an undercurrent of something darker. "Do you have traveled far to seek audience with me?" Dario bowed deeply, feeling the weight of those fiery eyes upon him. "I have, your majesty. The fame of Flame's wealth reaches every corner of the world. I come to propose a trade route that will bring even greater prosperity to your city." Azathoth smiled, but it was a cold, calculating smile. "Prosperity is always welcome. Tell me, what do you seek in return for your services? Wealth? Power?" Dario straightened, meeting the king's gaze. "I seek an alliance, my king, one that will make both of us richer beyond measure." Azathoth's eyes seemed to flicker with amusement. "Riches are plentiful in Flame. What else can you offer?" For a moment, Dario hesitated. The king's demeanor was unnerving, his words laced with hidden meaning. "I can offer connections," Dario said, trying to regain control of the conversation. Across the continent, merchants trust my name. With my influence, I can bring more trade to Flame than any of your rivals. The silence that followed was heavy. Azizra studied him, as if seeing into the depths of Dario's sad soul. Then he rose from the throne, his movements smooth and deliberate in approach. Trade, you say, Azaraf murmured, circling Dario like a predator circling its prey. Trade is the lifeblood of cities, it is true, but there are things more valuable than wealth. Dario felt his pulse quicken as Azaraf stopped in front of him, those burning eyes locking onto him. Do you know what makes Flame so powerful? The king whispered, his voice dangerously low. It is not gold or jewels or even the trade routes you so desperately wish to open. Azaraf leaned in closer. It is life. My life. Dario swallowed hard. The rumors, the whispers of Azaraf's immortality were all true. He had expected to find a man of great power, but this was something far more dangerous, and now he was in the middle of it. The days that followed were a blur of intrigue and uncertainty. Dario spent his time navigating the political landscape of Flame, meeting with advisors, merchants, and soldiers. Everywhere he went, the shadow of Azaraf loomed large. The king's control over the city was absolute, his immortality giving him an almost godlike status among the people. But there were cracks in the facade. Whispers of rebellion reached Dario's ears. The Sand Reavers, a faction of desert warriors who had once served under Azaraf, had turned against him, determined to end his reign. They spoke of a great injustice, of a curse that was slowly destroying the world, one soul at a time. Dario was drawn into their orbit despite his better judgment. One night, under the cover of darkness, he was led to a secret meeting deep within the city, labyrinthine street. The leader of the rebels, a woman named Demelia, greeted him with a wary nod. Dario, the merchant, she said, her voice low and measured. For I hear you seek an alliance with the undying king. I seek to trade, Dario replied, keeping his tone neutral. Trell, nothing more. Nalia's eyes narrowed. Trade, do you not see what is happening here? Azaraf's power does not come from wealth or strength. It comes from something far darker. His immortality is a curse that feeds on the souls of the dead. The longer he lives, the more this world dies. Dario felt a chill run down his spine. Dari, what are you saying? Nalia stepped closer, her gaze intense. Azaraf's immortality is tied to a flame crystal, an ancient relic hidden within the palace. It consumes the souls of those who perish in the desert, sustaining him. But in return, the land withers, the desert grows, and soon there will be nothing left. Dario struggled to process the enormity of what she was saying. And what do you expect me to do about it? Nalia's expression hardened. You are close to Azaraf, closer than any of us could ever hope to be. We need you to help us destroy the crystal. Without it, Azaraf's reign will end, and the desert will stop spreading. Dario's mind raced. The stakes had never been higher. Aligning with the rebels would mean betraying the most powerful man in Flame. But if what Nalia said was true, then the fate of the world hung in the balance. Dario stood in the cold silence of Nalia's words, his thoughts spinning like the desert wind. The flame crystal, a relic that consumed souls to keep Azaz alive. If this was true, then the whispers about the ever-growing desert were not just idle talk. They were the result of Azaraf's immortality, a parasitic force, slowly draining the life from the world. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Was he truly in a position to stop this? He had come to Flame seeking fortune, not a rebellion. And yet, if Nalia was right, the longer Azaraf reigned, the worse it would become. His own trade routes, his wealth, his future, none of it would matter if the world died around him. You can truly expect me to take on the undying king alone. Era he finally managed. His voice low. Nalia's eyes softened only slightly. Sorry, we don't expect you to do this alone. But you are the only one who can get close to him. You raised in the palace, you've seen him. We need someone on the inside. Dario ran a hand through his sweat-soaked hair, feeling the weight of her request settle onto his shoulder. He had been careful, cautious his whole life, every deal, every trade calculated to minimize risk. But this was madness. Why me? He's asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nelia stepped closer, her expression intense. Tell you, because if you don't, Dario, there will be nothing left for you to trade. No caravans, no wealth, only endless sand. The desert will swallow everything. Her words struck a chord deep inside him, and despite his instincts screaming at him to walk away, he found himself nodding. Tara, tell me what I need to do. The following day, Dario was summoned once again to Azaraph's palace. The grand hall was as it had been the first time, the air thick with the weight of secret. Azaraph sat on his black throne, his piercing eyes following Dario's every move. Merchandise of Zavos echoed through the chamber. Meyer, I trust you are finding flame to your liking. Dario forced a smile, bowing low. Indeed, your majesty, the city is as magnificent as the stories say. Azaraph leaned forward, his gaze never leaving Dario's face. Dario, and yet I sense hesitation in you. What troubles you, Dario? You came seeking fortune, did you not? Have I not been generous? Dario's heart pounded in his chest. He had rehearsed this moment over and over in his mind, but now that he stood before the king, the weight of his decision threatened to crush him. He had to be careful. One wrong word, and everything would unravel. I have been treated well, my king, Dario began, choosing his words carefully. But I have heard whispers in the city, whispers of unrest, of rebellion. Azar's eyes narrowed, the flame-like intensity in them flaring. Prior rebellion, and what do you know of this rebellion? Dario swallowed hard, only that there are those who wish to see you fall. They speak of your immortality and the flame crystal. The room fell into a tense silence. Azaraph's expression remained unreadable, but the air seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. Dario forced himself to keep his composure to meet the king's gaze without flinching. You are a bold man, Dario, Azaraph said after a long pause, his voice low and dangerous. To come here to speak of such things in my presence, you must be careful with your word. I mean no disrespect. My king, Dario replied quickly, from you seek to serve. If there are those who wish to see you fall, I would like to help you root them out. As Azaraph studied him for what felt like an eternity, then to Dario's surprise, the king's lips curled into a smile. Very well. Merchant, you wish to prove your loyalty, then you shall. There are forces at work in this city that seek to undo all that I've built. I will give you the opportunity to prove your worth to me. Find these rebels, bring them to me, and you will be rewarded beyond your wildest dream. Dario bowed again, his mind racing. It will be done, my king. As he left the palace, Dario's stomach twisted in knots. He had just pledged himself to the very man he was supposed to destroy. The plan was spiraling out of control, and he was trapped in the middle. Night fell, and the city of flame became a labyrinth of shadow. Dario moved quickly through the narrow streets, his hood pulled low over his face. He couldn't risk being seen, not now. Nalia was waiting for him at their agreed-upon meeting place, a small abandoned courtyard hidden from the main roads. Her expression was tense as she saw him approach. Did you speak with him? Dario nodded. He wants me to find you to expose the rebellion. Nalia's jaw tightened. Doesn't he suspect you? No, Dario replied, though doubt lingered in his mind. Here, but he and there are those who want to bring him down. Nalia let out a slow breath, her hand resting on the hilt of her dagger. Terzen, we must move quickly. You've seen the flame crystal? Not yet admitted, but I've been given access to the palace. I can find it. Nalia nodded, her eyes flickering with determination. Porza, once you find it, we'll need to act fast. The crystal must be destroyed, or this city and the world will continue to suffer. Dario clenched his fists. And what happens after? If we destroy the crystal, what happens to Azaraph? Nalia's days darkened. He dies without the crystal, since power his immortality ends. Dario looked away, his mind reeling. The stakes were higher than ever. He had been prepared for a simple trade deal, but now he was caught in a battle for the fate of the world. If they failed, Azaraph would surely have him executed, but if they succeeded, the king would fall and Flame would be free. There was no turning back now. The night of the heist arrived sooner than Dario expected. The palace was quieter than usual, the guards seemingly oblivious to the plot unfolding under their noses. Dario moved through the corridors with practiced ease, his heart pounding in his chest. Every step brought him closer to the flame crystal and closer to Azaraph's wrath if he was caught. Nalia and the rebels waited outside the palace, ready to strike as soon as the crystal was destroyed. It was up to Dario to find it, to end this once and for all. He had memorized the layout of the palace over the past days, noting the secret passageways and hidden chambers. It was in one of these chambers, deep beneath the palace, that the crystal was said to be kept. Dario descended a narrow staircase, the walls cold and damp. The air grew thick, with the scent of earth and something else, something metallic and acrid. His pulse quickened as he reached the bottom, where a massive iron door stood before him. Taking a deep breath, Dario pressed his hand against the door. It creaked open, revealing a vast chamber bathed in an eerie flickering light. At the center of the room, suspended above a pool of black water, was the flame crystal. It was larger than he had imagined, a jagged, pulsing stone that radiated heat and power. The light it emitted was unnatural, casting strange shadows across the wall. As Dario stepped closer, he felt the weight of its presence, like 1,000 voices whispering in the back of his mind. This was it, the source of a seraph's immortality. Dario reached into his cloak, pulling out the small hammer Nalia had given him. One blow to the crystal, she had said, and it would shatter. One blow, and a seraph, tree reign, would end. He raised the hammer, his grip tightening. But just as he was about to bring it down, a voice echoed through the chamber. Stop. Dario froze, the hammer inches from the crystal. He turned slowly, his heart leaping into his throat. Azazra stood in the doorway, his fiery eyes locked onto Dario. There was no anger in his expression, only cold amusement. You've come so far, merchant, the king said, stepping into the room. Stay, did you really think I wouldn't count it? Dario's hand trembled, the weight of the hammer suddenly too heavy to bear. Tears I tear. Azirath held up a hand. No need to explain. I know why you were here. You think you can destroy me? You think you can end my reign with a single blow? He chuckled softly, the sound sending chills down Dario's spine. But you've underestimated the power of the crystal. It is not simply a source of my immortality. It is the heart of this city without it. Flame will die. Dario's mind raced. Was this another of Azraph's tricks, or was he telling the truth? Azaz stepped closer, his gaze never leaving the crystal. Can't you see, Dario? The flame crystal does not just sustain me. It sustains everything. The desert, the city, even the very air you breathe. Destroy it and you destroy all of it. Dario's grip on the hammer loosened. This wasn't what he had expected. He had thought destroying the crystal would free the world. But now, leave it be, as he had said, his voice low and commanding. Biari, walk away and you will live, stay, and you will witness the end of everything. Dario's Ellen shook as he looked from the crystal to the king, his mind torn between the two impossible choices before him.